They buried the old world with grease-stained hands and silent goodbyes. But some ghosts don't stay dead. Calvin Merrick had once walked away from the edge, of violence, of ruin, of the man he used to be. For 3 decades, he traded fire for oil, fists for wrenches. Peace was earned, paid in full. Until a stranger named Bryce Langford stripped it all away. The garage, his legacy, his name. Now the old instincts stir, something darker, something buried. A man like Calvin doesn't start wars, but he sure as hell knows how to end them. Subscribe if you care about people clawing their way back from the edge. A special story is waiting for you. The clatter of tools, the low hum of engines, the familiar scent of grease, leather, and old metal. For Calvin Merrick, this was more than work. It was rhythm, sanctuary, a place where every click of a ratchet drowned out the chaos of the past. Until today, the silence hit harder than any punch he'd ever taken. He stood motionless in the center of Langford Auto, watching as a kid half his age, with slick hair, polished shoes, and a voice oiled with corporate smugness, shoved a man's lifetime into a cardboard box. Nothing personal, Calvin. Just streamlining the operation, Bryce Langford said, flipping a pen between his fingers like it was a dagger. 30 years, Calvin muttered, and not even a handshake. You're a legend, Bryce said, grinning, but legends don't pay bills. The door slammed behind him, louder in his ears than the roar of any engine. Just like that, the noise was gone. No shop, no title, no purpose. He tried calling around, other garages, other towns. Every lead turned cold. Too old, too experienced, too stubborn. He heard it in their voices. A man without a trade without a home. One evening, drunk on frustration and bad coffee, he took the long road out of town. The road no one drives anymore. That's when he saw it. An old garage sagging like a wounded beast. Windows cracked, roof rusted. But something about it stopped him cold. He stepped out of the truck, boots crunching gravel, and stared. It wasn't the building. It was the feel, like it was waiting for someone to remember it. But dreams, especially broken ones, needed more than just will. They needed backing. Luck, a second chance. That chance came the next morning in the form of Elias Croft, old friend, former rival, a man whose words still held weight around town. I heard what happened, Elias said, stepping out of his pickup with a quiet authority. Town needs you, Cal, not that snake. Calvin didn't answer right away. He was too busy staring at the broken-down building behind Elias. I'm in, Elias said, tossing him a ring of keys. Let's raise some hell. But hell doesn't rise without stirring old shadows. And some people don't like second chances. The sun rose blood orange over the edge of town, cutting through the broken windows of the old garage like a spotlight on a forgotten stage. Dust hung in the air. Tools lay where time had dropped them. A cracked photograph of a man and a boy, long since faded, sat on a workbench like a ghost too proud to leave. Calvin Merrick rolled up his sleeves. This place had bones and scars. But so did he. The first days were quiet, painfully so. Calvin worked like a man possessed, grinding, lifting, hammering, rewiring the electrics, fixing the lifts, replacing cracked panes with sheets of plexiglass he could barely afford. Every creak of the beams, every spark of the welder felt like heartbeats returning to something long considered dead. Elias showed up every morning with a thermos of black coffee and a head full of ideas. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. He believed. That was enough. But even hope has its limits. Money was drying up. Fast. They needed customers. Calvin, once the most trusted mechanic in Bridgemont, now looked like a ghost in a town that had moved on. Until Denny showed up. A teenage kid with a chipped front tooth, a busted dirt bike, and desperation in his eyes. You're the old guy from Langford's, right? He asked, shuffling his feet on the gravel. He wanted $600 just to look at it. Calvin knelt beside the bike, tracing his fingers over the cracked fuel line. You got 600? The kid looked down, shook his head. Then you pay what you can, Calvin said. 2 hours later, the bike coughed back to life. Denny's eyes lit up like headlights. Word spreads fast in small towns, even faster when it's about hope. By the end of the week, 2 more old customers dropped by. The week after, 5. They didn't come for cheap oil changes. They came for Calvin. But not everyone was happy. Late one night, after the last car had rolled out and Elias had gone home, Calvin stayed behind, cleaning up tools. The radio buzzed softly in the background. Then the power went out. A deep, sudden blackness. Calvin froze. Something scraped against the side of the garage. A low metallic drag, like a crowbar across siding. Then a window shattered. By the time Calvin reached the back, whoever it was had vanished. But the damage was done. The office ransacked. Wires pulled from walls. Spray paint in red across the shutters. Close up or bleed out. The old Calvin, the man he fought so hard to bury, would have chased them down. Instead, he stood in the wreckage, jaw clenched, fists trembling. He didn't know whether it was from fear or fury. The next morning, Elias arrived to find Calvin outside, hammering new boards over the broken window. "Bryce," Elias muttered, surveying the damage. Calvin didn't respond. He was too busy nailing down the last plank, too busy trying to keep his breathing steady. "I know that look, Cal," Elias said quietly. "Don't go back to who you were." Calvin looked up, eyes distant. "Maybe that's what it's going to take." That night, as he sat alone in the darkened office, a customer's note fluttered loose from the stack on the desk. It was written in pencil, shaky handwriting. "Thanks for treating us like people. Nobody does that anymore. Marlene and Jim, 1987. Ford Ranger, Calvin closed his eyes, fighting the sting in them. He'd lost everything once. He wasn't going to lose it again. But some fires don't just burn hot. They burn deep. And this time, it wasn't just about a garage. It was about taking back what never should have been stolen. Bryce Langford lit a cigar in his glass-walled office, high above the sanitized showroom of Langford Auto. Down below, the salesmen, young, eager, forgettable, were closing deals with too wide smiles and tighter terms. On his desk sat a photo, just delivered, a grainy shot of Calvin's garage, boarded windows and all. Scribbled on the back, "Still open." Bryce's jaw tightened. "Time to finish this," he muttered, dialing a number with the ease of a man used to dirty hands hidden in clean gloves. Back on the edge of town, Calvin and Elias were running on fumes, literally and financially. The garage had heart, but hearts didn't pay suppliers. They'd stretched Elias's investment to the bone. Then came Marlene, the woman from the note, 63 years old, with a firecracker attitude and a Ranger older than some of the parts it needed. "I told Jim before he passed, if anyone touches this truck but Calvin Merrick, I'll haunt him," she said with a crooked smile. She handed Calvin a stack of flyers. "What are these?" he asked. She winked. "A spark." By week's end, they were everywhere, on notice boards, coffee shops, church doors. Calvin's garage is back, where honesty still matters. That spark lit something fierce. One by one, the forgotten trickled in. Farmers, single moms, veterans, people burned by Bryce's fast talk and hidden fees. They brought their cars, their trust, their stories. The garage felt alive. It felt like his again. Then came the fire. Midnight, sirens, flames licking the sky. A neighbor's call saved the garage, barely. The back shed, used for storage, was gone, torched. Calvin stood in the glow, face blackened with soot, rage quietly boiling beneath his skin. No proof, no camera, no arrests, just a message left in the ash. "Should have stayed gone." Elias found him the next morning staring at the embers. "You think this is how they end us?" Elias asked. "No," Calvin said, voice hollow. "This is how they wake me up." Later that day, a black SUV pulled up. Clean, sleek. Out stepped a man in a pressed gray suit with sunglasses that didn't hide the contempt in his expression. "Mr. Merrick," he said, extending a business card. "Randall Knox, legal counsel for Langford Auto." Calvin didn't take it. Knox smiled thinly. "You're infringing on proprietary service methods, using former client lists, and operating without modern compliance. If you don't shut down voluntarily, we'll bury you, legally, financially, maybe otherwise." Calvin stepped forward, close enough for Knox to flinch. "You tell Bryce," Calvin said slowly, "if he wants my soul, he should have bought it before I found it again." But deep inside, Calvin knew what was coming. This wasn't just sabotage. This was a campaign, coordinated, calculated, and dangerous. Later that week, Denny returned, this time with a bruised cheek and silence in his eyes. "Who did it?" Calvin asked. The boy just looked away. Calvin didn't need to hear the name. He already knew. That night, Calvin sat alone in the garage, lights off, door cracked open, staring into the dark like it owed him something. The air was still, too still. Then came footsteps, slow, careful. He didn't move, just listened. A voice, soft, familiar, cut through the dark. "I want in." It was Harper, mechanic, former street racer, Calvin's daughter, estranged for 10 years, standing in his doorway, grease under her nails and fire in her eyes. "Let's finish what you started, old man," she said. Calvin didn't speak. He just stepped aside. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. The garage had never felt more alive. 2 days after Harper's return, the rhythm returned. Tools clanged, engines roared, and for the first time in years, laughter cracked between the walls like thunder. Father and daughter worked side by side in near silence, their movements seamless. Years of separation melted into unspoken language. Calvin adjusting a carburetor without looking, Harper handing him the wrench before he asked. But silence only holds so long. "You still drink too much coffee," Harper muttered under the hood of an old Bronco. Calvin didn't look up. "You still leave your socket sets scattered like breadcrumbs." A pause, then a smirk. A start. They didn't talk about what split them. Not yet. But the space between them had softened. Harper wasn't just here to reconnect. She'd heard about the fire, the threats. Bryce. "Corporate bastards like Langford only understand two things," she said, wiping her hands on a rag. "Loyalty and leverage." She dropped a file on the desk. Photos, documents, invoices. "Got a friend at the DMV, cross-referenced repairs with upcharges. Langford's charging folks for work never done." Calvin blinked. "How long you been sitting on this?" "Long enough to know we can hit him where it hurts." Elias looked at the file like it might bite. "This is war," he warned. Harper grinned. "No, Elias. This is justice." That night, Elias met a man in a diner just off the highway. Neutral ground. Sheriff Connolly, grizzled, honest. Slow to act, but slower to forget. "You really think Bryce is behind all of it?" Connolly asked, nursing a mug of lukewarm coffee. Elias slid the file across. "This ain't about thinking. It's about knowing." Connolly sighed. "I can't move unless there's hard proof. Something recent. Concrete." "You'll have it," Elias said. He stood, leaving behind a slip of paper with one word. Harper. Meanwhile, Bryce was slipping. Reports of returning customers, declining profits, employees quitting. Someone had tipped off his investors. He paced in his office, a wolf in a glass cage, snapping orders into his phone. "Make sure that damn garage doesn't last the month." "Already working on it," Randall Knox said on the other end. "But sir, there's been a leak." Bryce stopped cold. "What kind of leak?" "Someone's talking. We just don't know who." Bryce turned toward the window, eyes narrowing. Below, people bought cars with fake smiles and locked-in interest rates. "Then find out," he said, and shut them up. Back at Calvin's garage, Harper pulled up late with 2 laptops, a box of files, and a duffel bag that rattled with metal and fury. "You planning on moving in?" Calvin asked. "I'm planning on winning," she said, sliding a USB into the computer. She showed him everything. False reports, ghost labor, tampered inspection logs. Then she paused. Clicked a folder marked 1997, internal incident. Calvin's face darkened. "No." Harper looked at him. "It's not just his shop we're burning down," she said. "It's the whole damn lie." Calvin stepped away. That year, 1997, was the year he almost went to prison. The year someone else took the fall. The year Bryce Langford's father made Calvin disappear in exchange for silence. And now the son was repeating history, with cleaner suits and dirtier hands. The final blow came days later. Denny's dirt bike was found smashed outside the town junkyard. He was nowhere to be found. Harper stormed into the sheriff's office, file in hand. Connolly read it once, then again, his jaw clenched. "This is enough. That night, warrants were signed, but someone tipped Bryce off. By the time the deputies arrived, Langford Auto was empty. Computers gone. Offices cleared. Phones disconnected. Bryce Langford had vanished. Back at the garage, Harper sat on the hood of a rebuilt Chevelle, eyes on the stars. Calvin joined her, handing her a beer. "Didn't think you'd come back," he said. She took a sip. "Didn't think you'd be worth coming back for." They sat in the silence for a long while. "Why'd you leave?" he asked softly. Harper hesitated. "Because I was afraid you'd become who you used to be. And now, I think you're trying to become someone better." A beat. "Trying," she added. Calvin chuckled, then grew quiet. "I need to find him," he said. "Bryce, this won't end until I do." Harper looked at him, eyes hardening. "Then we hunt." It started with a whisper. A truck stop mechanic outside Klamath Falls mentioned a man with soft hands and a clipped accent asking about false plates. 2 days later, a motel clerk in Wyoming remembered a guest who paid in cash and always kept the blinds closed. Bryce Langford was on the run, but Calvin Merrick had waited a lifetime for purpose. He wasn't letting it slip through his fingers now. Harper handled the logistics, burner phones, back-channel contacts, a friend from her racing days with access to traffic cams and plate recognition software. She was her father's daughter, clever, relentless, and hell-bent on justice. Each lead brought them closer and deeper. What started as a garage war had spiraled into a manhunt. Bryce hadn't just fled. He'd stolen funds, scrubbed records, and burned bridges across 3 counties. But his ego left a trail. Calvin knew that kind of arrogance. He once carried it like a badge. 3 weeks later, they found him. A cabin in the hills outside Durston Creek. Isolated, expensive. Paid for in the name of a shell company that traced back to one of Langford Auto's consulting firms. Calvin stood at the edge of the driveway as wind howled around him. Harper waited by the truck, eyes locked on him. "You sure about this?" she asked. "No," Calvin said, "but I'm done hiding." He walked up to the door, knocked once, then again. Silence. Then a click, the door creaking open. And there he was, Bryce Langford, unshaven, hollow-eyed, still dressed in wealth he hadn't earned. "I knew you'd come," he muttered. Calvin stepped inside. The cabin was sterile, too clean. No signs of life, just money trying to impersonate comfort. Bryce poured himself a drink with shaking hands. "You ruined everything," he said bitterly. Calvin laughed. "Just once. You ruined everything a long time ago. I just stopped letting you win." Bryce's mask cracked. "You think this ends with you walking away the hero? You and your daughter can't fix this town. You're just grease monkeys, relics." Calvin moved closer. Calm. Cold. "Relics don't need to be new, just built to last." He tossed a file on the table. Harper's full report. Copied, backed up, sent to the sheriff, the press, and every former client Bryce ever burned. "Game's over," Calvin said. Bryce's face twisted. "I'll start over." Calvin nodded slowly. "You will, in a courtroom, if you're lucky." Then from the shadows, Sheriff Connolly stepped in. "You're under arrest, Langford." Bryce didn't resist. He didn't speak. Just stared at Calvin with something that wasn't quite hate, but wasn't far from fear. The trial dragged out for months, but the verdict was inevitable. Fraud, tampering, endangerment. The town watched from courthouse benches and bar stools, and when the sentence came, 10 years, no parole, they didn't cheer. They just exhaled, like something heavy had finally lifted. Back at the garage, things weren't perfect. The roof still leaked when it rained. Supplies came in slow. Denny was recovering, slowly rebuilding both his bike and his trust in people. But the community, they showed up. Elias organized a fundraiser. Marlene brought cookies and coffee every morning. Even strangers began arriving, hearing whispers of the shop that stood its ground. Harper stayed, built her own corner of the business, custom mods, street rebuilds, brought in a younger crowd. She and Calvin didn't fix everything between them, but the silence was gone. One night, under the stars again, she asked, "You ever think about walking away again?" Calvin looked out across the lot, where cars waited, lights humming in the dusk. "Every damn day," he said, "but now I've got a reason not to." The radio played softly in the background. A customer laughed in the waiting area. Harper leaned under a hood, humming to herself. And Calvin? He stood in the center of it all, hands black with oil, heart full of something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not perfection, but peace. Because this wasn't just a shop anymore. It was proof that some men can change, that some towns can heal, and that some fires once lit don't destroy. They forge. The end.